Hey everybody, I've been off the grid for a little bit, but I wanted to come ahead and check in ahead of Super Tuesday and just sort of do a brief recap. As many of we've already saw the results a few hours ago that Joe Biden is clearly the winner on the South Carolina primary. We really aren't surprised, any of us who were paying attention, that this was going to be the result. The size of the win is definitely something that is perhaps a bit of a shock, just because even in the most advantageous polls, he was coming in maybe 16 to 20 points up if you're looking at some of those more recent RCP polls. So to see basically a 30% spread between him and Sanders shows a pretty remarkable couple of things that I wanted to just briefly go over. The first thing is that anyone who's ever underestimated the value and the ability of the black community to come out in force and make their voice heard better start paying attention to the kinds of things that we saw here in the Carolinas. There's no question about it that once there's a degree of loyalty to a candidate, it's pretty unflappable, and it is pretty impressive to see. One of the things that I want to kind of address, though, is a very lightly covered, in other words, almost completely not covered story about what was going on in the couple of days leading up to the primary that we just had. And the Daily Kos covered it, and a couple of small little people here and there, but just enough to have some credibility. That what we saw was roughly 131 polling stations were closed down, and a third of them were consolidated, which is a fun way of saying relocated and combined with some other location. Apparently, the only notice that the South Carolinian voting populace received for any of this activity was a post to the South Carolina website or whatever. And basically, this type of last second, virtually zero notice kind of maneuvering is legal because of a Supreme Court ruling that came through a few years back that basically threw out and gutted, voting rights laws in America. This was pretty famous. If you were following it at the time, it was probably one of the most significant and final rulings that I think Scalia was involved in, and they basically the majority opinion had something to say along the lines that these types of regulations were no longer necessary because why? I guess they thought racism was no longer a thing, and so I am not going to say that the vote turned out the way that it did, specifically because of this type of tactic. But we do know that these polling stations that were relocated were largely in more densely populated county, the most densely populated county in South Carolina. And as we've seen in the past, when the Democratic Party starts kind of going after Bernie Sanders support, they usually do so by targeting densely populated areas because they know that those are the areas that are the most likely to contain more liberal, more progressive folks. So, what is the impact of that? I would say probably not much. I mean, let's just say hypothetically, a few percentage points might have been shifted towards Bernie's favor had, all of this not happened. Maybe, let's say that, sure. But clearly Biden was going to be the winner in the Carolinas. The reason that I bring this up isn't about whether, Biden won fair and square or not. I believe he won. I think he won bigger, at least in a small way, because of this. But the reason this is relevant is that this should be a huge red flag for anyone in a Super Tuesday state or any of the other 46 states that have yet to cast their ballots, because we can expect that any state where more establishment, figures are in charge of these kinds of operations, and let's be real, that's most of them at this point, we're probably going to see a lot more dirty tricks just like that. So, congratulations to Joe Biden and his supporters. You guys had a big win. And frankly, congrats to Pete Buttigieg for getting 7 and some odd percent. I mean, really, honestly, I'm amazed given the way that, most folks, I mean, I'm sure that if we looked at the numbers, most of that was not an ethnic support base, but I really didn't even expect him to hit past 5%. So congrats to you on that. Super Tuesday is coming up, however, and Joe Biden is in the exact same boat that Pete Buttigieg was coming out of Iowa. He had put all of his eggs in this basket. So while Pete did well and won the the technical vote in Iowa, and while Biden did fantastic at winning the popular vote in this primary here in South Carolina, neither one of them have any kind of operation moving ahead, and both of them were counting on some sort of huge media boost to propel them into a popular position. But because they were both playing on the same set of rules, the same tactic was being applied in both camps, ultimately their momentum is going to be divided. And when you add a third lane of, never mind momentum from victories or debate performances, but just the enormous cash that Biden or that Bloomberg camp presents, you're not changing the outcome at all. You still got 3 lanes of folks who are not allowed, as much as the media might like, are not allowed to combine their votes. So you're going to see essentially, the Bloomberg camp pulling, 10 or 15% in a bunch of states. You're going to see the Biden camp pulling in 15 or 20% from a bunch of states, and you're going to see Buttigieg, coming in, maybe around, 10% ish himself, and Bernie is going to probably consistently perform in the high 20s in a lot of states. Warren will probably pick up around the same numbers as Buttigieg. I mean, that's pretty much where they've been. They've been pretty neck and neck. They're sort of, the second choice for the moderate and progressive lane, and that seems to be about a 10% number, for both of them. The other white meat, I guess you could call those two, and that's where they're stuck at, right? So, we're hearing that, yes, of course, this is the stage where some of these 3rd, 4th, and 5th place contestants are going to be looking to join forces and, curry favors with, front runners, and we're going to see how that plays out. But it's pretty clear that there's not enough time before Super Tuesday for anything remarkable to happen. I think if Warren and Buttigieg came out tomorrow and said, everybody that likes us, throw your support behind Biden or something, I don't think it would be enough time to see that shift needed to get Biden over Bernie in all the states that Bernie is projected to win, which is almost all of them, including Warren's home state. He's looking good there as well. So Super Tuesday is expected to be a big win for Bernie, but we're already seeing those tricks that we saw in the Carolinas. We're seeing the tricks that we saw in Iowa. There are a lot of people on the ground whose intention is to protect their party, whose intentions are to protect what they see as their country from a threat, from an outside threat, which is an independent socialist, right? So, if you're out there and you're thinking about this, I want you to try and remember that, yes, some of those folks out there are bought and paid for thugs, for sure, right? I mean, we already saw it happen innumerable numbers of times throughout history, right? I mean, this is what got Nixon impeached. This is the kind of thing we've seen many times. But we have to also remember that folks that are out there are individuals who are doing what they believe is the right thing, and sometimes those actions are, ultimately corrupt, right? They feel that they're going to be doing something good by fudging numbers on, you know, Iowa ballot sheets, or not sheet, worksheets, or whatever little trick that the individual on the ground thinks they're going to do to save the day. And this is really why, reform is so necessary. Anyway, that's really a topic for another time. So I'm going to go ahead and post this up. And I look forward to seeing some good news on the whole that I'll be talking about more in a couple of days. So good luck, everybody, and I'll see you on the other side.